Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Now, Uthman is a businessman from Senegal who understands the importance of diversifying income. Hence, he teams up with Abdullah, an ambitious young man who knows his way around the city and is very capable of driving motor vehicles. Now, seeing that there is a high demand for taxi services in the country, Uthman enters into a business contract with Abdullah, one in which Uthman would give his Norton Commando motor vehicle to Abdullah for him to drive around the city as a taxi. Accordingly, the partners Uthman and Abdullah stipulated the following as the terms and conditions of their contract. Duration-wise, the parties agreed to a 6 months contract, renewable subject to mutual agreement. Return-wise, Uthman would receive $100 from Abdullah on a daily basis, and Abdullah gets to keep all returns above $100. Lastly, as it relates to costs, Abdullah agrees to bear all maintenance costs related to the motor vehicle throughout the tenure of the contract. And before signing any document or making any payments, Uthman approaches you, the Sharia advisor, seeking your expert judgment on whether or not the contract is Sharia-compliant, meaning free from all Sharia issues. Now, to assess the validity of Uthman's partnership with Abdullah, we need to address 3 main issues. Firstly, the Norton Commando as capital. Secondly, the fixing of gains in partnerships. And thirdly, the entrepreneur as the sole bearer of all maintenance costs. Now, before we tackle these issues head on, let's take a step or two back and unpack the partnership contract at play, known as a mudaraba. Now, a mudaraba is typically understood to be an equity-based contract in which one partner, known as the Rabbul Mal or capital provider, contributes capital or mal, whilst the other partner, known as the entrepreneur or mudarib, contributes labor. Now, scholars have also referred to the practice as a silent or sleeping partnership, seeing that one partner's contribution is limited to providing capital. Now, at this juncture, it is important that we look into the key components of a mudaraba contract, namely the partners, the capital, and the profit-loss sharing arrangements. With regards to the partners, it was mentioned earlier that of the 2 types, one is a capital provider known as Rabbul Mal, whilst the other is an entrepreneur known as a mudarib. Now, both partners are required to have legal capacity or ahliya, entailing that they are of sound mind, capable of discerning between right and wrong, and able to acquire rights and bear responsibilities in the eyes of the law. Now, in relation to the capital, which is the second component of a mudaraba, scholars are in dispute over the kinds of properties that may be considered as so. Now, while the majority view dinar and dirham, in essence currency, as the sole permissible mudaraba capital owing to the change in value of non-monetary assets that potentially results in one partner obtaining an unfair advantage over the other, scholars like Ibn Abi Layla and Al-Awza'i recognize urud at-tijara or goods for sale as permissible mudaraba capital as well. So we see that both finances or currency and goods for sale have been recognized by reputable scholars as valid mudaraba capital. Lastly, the profit-loss sharing component. Now, typically, partners in a contract expect to achieve an economic gain that is accordingly shared between them. Now, the Sharia mandates that their gains are set as a ratio or a percentage of the expected returns, as opposed to a fixed amount or a percentage of the capital. A failure to observe this rule would render the mudaraba contract a usurious loan, a qard ribawi, one in which the Rabbul Mal's capital and or gains are guaranteed. Such principle is derived from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he is reported to have said, "Indeed, profit is the reward for the readiness to bear the loss." From this, the Islamic legal maxim, al-ghunmu bil-ghurmi, is derived, which simply means that to gain, one must risk bearing losses. Now, it is worth mentioning here that the kind of loss borne by each partner differs in nature. Whereas the Rabbul Mal bears losses in terms of finances invested, the mudarib bears losses in the form of labor or effort invested. By virtue of this, the mudarib should not be liable for any financial losses unless it is established that they were negligent, disorderly, or in breach of their duties. The bottom line is that while the mudaraba partners' share in profits can be based on whatever they agree upon, their losses are subject and restricted to the nature of their contribution. And with that, we have covered the key components of a mudaraba contract. In the second part of this video, we will apply these key components to our current scenario and ultimately be able to advise Uthman on whether or not his mudaraba contract with Abdullah is indeed Sharia compliant or not. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.